Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to
Kill Factory
Motorsports. I'm Den, and we're gonna get back into it. Last video I made, I took out the carburetor on an FZ-750 and instructed on how to do that. In this video, I've noticed that there's some issues with it. There's some screws missing, and it needs a heavy cleaning. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna clean it, replace the screws. Now, one of the issues that I had was finding a screw set for the carburetors for a 1988 FZ-750. That's why I had bought a secondary parts bike. So I'm gonna show it to you now. Here's the bike I'm working on currently. And here's the bike that I'm gonna steal the carburetor from. I'm gonna go ahead and use the carburetor from this bike. But I'm gonna take the screws, the good screws out of this carburetor to get this one in better shape. I don't know if you can see, but a lot of these screws have been stripped and worn from prior dismantling. And I'd like to get everything perfect. There's some missing screws on this side here. So what I plan to do is take the other carburetor, get all the screws and parts I need off of that, and then when it comes time to restore the other bike, I'll be able to order all these screw sets and all the extra parts that I'll need because I won't be in such a rush to finish it. So that's what we're gonna tackle today. Okay, I was able to get some decent looking screws from the parts bike that I have. I didn't want to take the whole carburetor out, so I just kind of ducked my head in there and pulled some screws off. And this is the kind of stuff I was dealing with. Just really stripped and messed up. So I'm gonna try and get the best screws I can on this carburetor, and then go online and try and search for like a full carburetor parts kit for this bike, which I think they're fairly hard to find. I just want to make sure I'm using the exact proper screws and such. I did go to Home Depot today and try and find a match for these, but they weren't the gold style machine screws, and they weren't the exact type of screw head. So you know, I wanted to be safe and get existing parts. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this apart one by one. I'm gonna get one carburetor off, then I'm gonna take off the back end and see if the float's good, and if the tips are good, and probably just clean everything out, clean off the whole carburetor itself, and just do that one by one, put it back together, and we should all be good to go after that. So just bear with me here. I'm gonna just kind of take this apart little by little. Just so I can separate them properly and do the best job I can. First thing I want to do is separate the carburetor from these mounts. I'm not exactly sure how all these mechanisms are attached, so I'm trying to be extra careful, but it looks as though I'm gonna have to take these brackets completely off just to separate the carburetor from all these mechanisms. I want to make sure to be extra careful because I don't want to screw myself and end up with something I don't know how to put back together. But at the end of the day, if I do end up with that problem, I have an entirely other carburetor on the parts bike that I bought. So, you know, even if I majorly screw up, I think I'll get out of it just fine. So. One thing I've got to do to be careful is remember which brackets were on which side and in which direction. I sort of wasn't paying attention when I took off this bracket, so it's a good thing I'm recording so I can go back and look just to make sure it's facing the right way. Again, the other option is looking at the parts bike and looking at that carburetor to make sure I get that back on in the right direction. But since I've done that, that's the top carburetor. I know that this bracket goes on top and it's above me. Here's the bottom carburetor. I know this bracket is gonna go down here. It's gonna go on the bottom of the carburetor, and I'm putting it toward the bottom here. Let me just remember the orientation. Okay. I think I'll remember that. And now let's try and separate each of these from this mechanism. This is what I'm really, really cautious about right now. Okay, here's the update. This mechanism here is quite complicated, and where I'm not afraid to take it apart, at this juncture I don't feel like it's a good idea, because my whole plan for the first bike is to get one bike running as quick as possible so I can use it for transportation, and then have the second parts bike. I can totally dismantle it, rebuild it from the ground up, and have a very perfect bike out of that one. So since this is going to be just a ride-around bike, what I think I'm gonna do is just try and clean the carburetors just as they're sitting in the rack. And then I'll pull them out, dismantle them, and clean out the insides as well. But at this point, being that this is a pretty complicated mechanism and I don't wanna mess it up or forget where things go or offset them in any way, I think I'm just gonna try and clean it as is. So I'm gonna come up with a technique to that'll hopefully work to really get a lot of this grease and grime and stuff, and get some vibration in there to maybe whittle away any chunks of stuff that's inside the tubes and what have you. So let's see if I can devise something cool. I'm just gonna take off this entire bracket here. That's nice. Yeah, that bracket does in fact stop the mechanism in its turn. So let's hope this fits in my bucket. That's decent. Okay. All right. Let's just hope this works, but I've got it all in a bucket. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna attach my electric sander to it in order to get it to vibrate after I fill it up with a bunch of formula. Maybe some carburetor cleaner, some degreaser, just kind of mix a bunch of deep cleaning agents up there and hopefully vibrate all the crap off of it. So we'll see if it works. Fortunately, it did not fit properly in that container, and the container broke, so now I'm gonna go have to find a separate container. All right, I found a container that it will fit in, mostly. So I've just gotta fill it up with some cleaner. I've gotta find a good cheap cleaner to use because this is gonna be a pretty deep container, but I don't know, let's see if it works. All right, I wanna go ahead and show you what I've concocted for my carburetor clean. First thing is I had to find a container big enough to house the entire quad carburetor, which I finally did. Then I put in some carburetor cleaner alongside with some degreaser, and I didn't have a whole lot of that stuff, so I'm like, what else can I mix with it? Luckily, I Amazon primed some distilled white vinegar, so I just poured a half a gallon of that in there. I've hooked my electric sander up to the container, and now I've got this crazy vibrating cleaning device, which should break down everything within the carburetor that might be stuck or grimed up. So let's give it a try. I've taken my my toe straps and I've just strapped the sander to the side of this bucket. I've got it half filled with liquid because there's a lot of liquid, so can run it for like 20 minutes and then flip over the carburetor on the other side and then let that clean for 20 minutes, and I'm really hoping this does the trick. I've done some research and saw some guys do some similar things, so I'm really crossing my fingers on this one. Let's give it a start. seems like it's gonna work. Now I just gotta find a cover for it so it doesn't make a mess, splash around, but gonna run that for a little bit and see what happens. All right, here we go. My little invention worked a little bit. I wish I had better cleaner in there, but I did come down and wipe it down a bit more, and all the grease just kind of fell right off. I'm hoping it did well to kind of unclog any small little sediment inside the carburetor with the vibration and everything. I won't really know for sure, but what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and take this all apart and just kind of go through all the little pieces inside and make sure they're clean, and just go little by little to clean every bit of this out that I can, and that's the best I'm gonna really be able to do with my limited knowledge. So that's what I'm gonna do now. We're gonna just clean out the inside and then put it back on the bike and hope to get this thing started.
Here I am, coming back to you as the voice of God. Yes, I'm now going to slightly narrate what's going on here. You probably won't hear from me much in the future, but for this small fast-forwarding part, I am your God. Anyhow, here I am cleaning out what I believe they call the pots. This is where they have the floats. This is where they have all the little specific screws within the carburetors that allow very tiny amounts of jets of fuel to go in at certain times and with certain pressures. This is all stuff I've learned throughout the process, but also still have very limited knowledge about. Carburetor is a very complex and complicated piece of equipment, which is why I think motorcycles nowadays tend to not use carburetors as far as getting fuel into the engine. A lot of them now are just fuel injected, or they have different methods here and there. Anyhow, so what I'm doing is I'm taking off every single pot, removing every little screw very, very carefully. I'm being careful as to how tight I'm screwing them back in. I'm using carburetor cleaner to spray and clean every bit of sediment or grime or anything off of the inside of these pots, and I'm being as extremely careful as possible.
Just a little update here. I was trying to be very careful as to where everything went, because I am a novice. And I seem to have found a little spring that I didn't see come out. So it's a good thing I'm doing these one by one so I can carefully dissect the next one to put the first one back together properly. So I'm not going to worry about it, but that's why you do one thing at a time. You don't take them all apart and then have no idea what to do next. You always have a backup plan. Moving on.
God here again. Just checking back in with you to let you know exactly what's going on in my speed through cleaning of these carburetors. At this point, I'm still cleaning deeply, being very, very careful, using the screwdriver here and there and putting the towel over it to kind of scrape away some of the grime that's been stuck. I'm also unscrewing and screwing in those jet streams. There is fuel that gets sprayed through those things at a very specific pressure. So I've blown in and out of those things to make sure that they're clear of debris. I've also made sure to tighten them back just as tight as they were already fitted in there to begin with. Not too tight, not too loose, just as they were. Also, you can see me messing around with the floats in these pots. They look like lungs. Those things are connected with a very, very delicate pin, and I'm very, very careful to remove them and put them back exactly the way they were, as to not screw up any sort of measurement that these carburetors make.
Here I am having the problem again with a lot of these screws being stripped. So hopefully the ones I got off of the other bike I'll have enough of those to get this thing back together. Okay, so by the looks of this extra little spring I found probably didn't go to the carburetor at all. I was just very worried about it, so I wanted to take the second one apart and really figure it out. So I think we're safe. I can go ahead and finish cleaning the first one and then start on the second one and have a better idea of exactly what I'll be looking for, or what I'm looking at, to be clear. Alright, let's put this stuff in here for now. Let's get this last piece off and then get this thing back together. There's a lot of gunk in here. This might be one of my biggest problems with the carburetor. Now, I know this is exactly what my problem is, because I've put my mouth on here and blown through the hoses where the gas comes in. And I've plugged up each one, and they all have kind of varying degrees of airflow that are going through. So now I know 100% this is where my main issue is. Even though I'm a novice, I'm figuring this stuff out little by little.
Me again. I'm gonna go ahead and spare you some time. This is another 30 minutes of fast forward, so we're just gonna cut this short. I'll clip through it quickly. As far as the video is concerned, I assure you I'm doing the same exact thing to every single pot. Pulling out all the jets, blowing through them, making sure that when I have a piece on the table, it's in a position to where I can remember exactly how it goes back. I'm pulling those pins out carefully from the floats, aka those lungs, and I'm being very, very delicate. So yeah, just do that with every single pot 4 times straight, and you've cleaned them out. Now let's go ahead and skip past this.
Here's a little move I'm inventing here. I've learned that this piece comes out, it's got a filter in it, but it just will not come out with my fingers. And I know everything in a carburetor is very delicate, you don't want to screw anything up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over it so I can grip firmly but lightly with the pliers. And it worked. And I did not damage the piece. So, pro tip. Alright, I did a good clean on everything I could inside. You know, I did the best I could, cleaned. I would blow on a lot of the tubes to try and clean the pathway. This is where the fuel comes in, so I was blowing on this a lot when I would open up some of the little slots with the filters, just to kind of clear the pathways, and hopefully I did a good job cleaning. There are some certain things that I don't know that I'm gonna have to look up to figure out about. One of them is these guys back here. I realized they let a little bit of liquid through, so they have to be turned a certain amount of times to decipher that. So I've got to figure that out.
Here we go, last one, I promise. And if I'm wrong, I will give you 1,000 koalas. You can call my lawyer. Anyhow, as you can see, I'm pulling out the seals and pistons from the other side of the carburetors. You've got to be very, very careful with this side of the carburetors. Those little plastic seals can be very delicate. Sometimes you'll find a rip in that little plastic piston area that creates the suction, in which case if you do, you're going to have to figure out how to order and buy a new one, or maybe acquire a new set of carburetors and use them as to piece apart. If those are ripped in any way, shape, or form, they cannot create a seal, and there's no way for fuel to be injected into the carburetors. That's the most important part of this clean. So, as before, take everything apart, do it one by one, know exactly where each part goes. Each time you take something out and put it back in exactly as it was, but make sure you clean it thoroughly and make sure that all the jets or any area that fuel might be getting shot through is completely clear of debris. Do it for all 4 of these, and you cleaned your carburetor, sir or ma'am. I'm a very PC god. I say things the way they're supposed to be said, so all those crazy PC police won't come out and get me. Anyhow, like I said, these carburetors are clean. You'll see in the future that a lot of good stuff happens with this bike. I happen to know, because I'm God, I know what happened in the future of this restoration. Also, please enjoy that I'm wearing a shirt from Paris, France. I advise all of you to go visit France and Paris if you get the chance. It's a lovely and wonderful place. If you need to, you should go get engaged there and possibly married, because she will like you for that, or he. Alrighty, and this is our final fast forward. Just continue following through, and you have finished. Peace out.
Alright, that took a really long time. I basically cleaned out every single nook and cranny, blew through every pipe, wiped down, sprayed out, cleaned out every little bit I could find in this carburetor. So like I said, I don't know too much about it. I'm learning, but I think I did a pretty good job at cleaning it. Next thing is to put this back on the bike and hope that it runs. There we go, that was it. I finished cleaning up the carburetor. It was a long process, took me like half a day. Cleaned out every nook and cranny, got it all shiny and nice, blew out all the pipes. Hopefully I did a good job. I wasn't able to replace any parts because I couldn't find a kit, but I plan to do that one day when I restore the other bike. So just for now, I cleaned it up and I'm gonna reinstall it into the bike. If you need help installing the carburetor, just look at my video where I took out the carburetor. Do that in reverse. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and put this on, and want to mention one thing. I put rags into each one of those holes just to keep anything from getting into the head of the bike, which would completely destroy it. So make sure you do that if you ever take the carburetor off. Just plug up those holes and don't let anything creep in there. So thanks. Tune in, subscribe, rate, like, comment, all that stuff. See you later.